BrightWire has been providing network support and services in the local Olympia, Tacoma area for about the last 10 years or so. One of the biggest issues in IT, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, has been network security. What we'd like to do is introduce you to some tips and tricks on how to deal with protecting your business networks. How many people in the room depend on computer systems to run your business on a day-to-day basis? Innovation in IT, I think everyone would agree that IT itself is innovative. It allows us to do more with less. One of the downsides of that is it also allows criminals to take advantage of that innovation. The proximity to your business network is not measured in miles, it's measured in milliseconds. So even though we have adversaries overseas, they can detect and hack into our systems pretty much at will, unless you take appropriate countermeasures. So we're going to go into some of those. It's not as much of a technical issue as it is a human resources issue. So that's essentially what we want to do. So we want to beat the hackers and phishers, or beat the fackers, which I think is a little bit easier terminology to work with. So currently BrightWire focuses on helping small businesses in this area across several industry verticals, healthcare, financial services. Those are under regulatory compliance, so they have special needs and requirements for network security. There's quite a bit of manufacturing in this area, and that's one of our other key folk and related services in that area. And then also unique to Olympia would be trade associations. So there's quite a few of those in the area that we work with. We provide an array of services for those organizations. And it kind of breaks down into this simple box. So in a nutshell, BrightWire functions as an outsourced IT department. So we undertake the responsibility for these local area organizations and businesses as an outsourced IT department for them. We work best when we closely partner with them and we have collaboration with their management teams. But on a day-to-day basis, really that boils down into kind of 4 key areas. Systems management, which is kind of the day-to-day under the hood, fix systems, make sure they're patched for security vulnerabilities. Along with that is client help desk support, so that's a hotline for our clients to call and get support when something's not working correctly, or they notice something, disruption to their day-to-day operation. Along those lines is technology consulting, so that's going to be long-term business planning, budget, the appropriate countermeasures for some of these security issues we're going to talk about today. And then lastly, what's becoming more and more to the forefront is just kind of a general security awareness. I think I read something on the order of only 3% of network infiltrations are actually caused by some sort of automated technology vulnerability. The other 97% is you and I, people that make a mistake or they're tricked into doing something. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. So really, this is kind of our mission statement going into 2017 and beyond. It's key that we partner with companies and organizations that are forward-thinking, that strategically embrace technology, and our goal is to help them become more productive, which entails all of the things that we're going to talk about today. So this is a representation of the threat landscape that's out there. There's a whole list of attack methodologies. There's threats. There's various types of attackers, ranging from disgruntled insiders, which would be employees, to hacktivism, script kiddies, which are basically, probably teenagers and young folks in their 20s that are experimenting with these things. Hopefully they'll turn to the right direction, but we also have organized crime, and that's actually one of the areas that we're going to touch on today a little bit, is the efforts of organized crime. Across the First Mountain Range, we have the array of defenses. So we have defense in-depth tools. These are all of the antivirus, anti-malware, firewalls, things of that nature that an IT department would be familiar with, but really on a day-to-day basis, it's really kind of transparent to you and I. The problem with more security is that it becomes less convenient. So you have to provide more passwords, you've got to log into this, you've got to change that. And then finally, we have the targets themselves, which are everything from national infrastructure of the United States to corporate resources, even personal identity theft and things of that nature. So we're going to touch on 3 areas of that entire landscape today. I want to talk a little bit about best practices for Wi-Fi. How many people right now are on Wi-Fi? The other one we're going to look at is a concept known as SpearPhishing. How many are familiar with phishing attacks or SpearPhishing or understand what that is exactly? So SpearPhishing really is a targeted effort to try to trick somebody into doing something that they should not do, that's going to compromise their business network or their identity potentially. It's an effort to try to get some sort of software installed on the laptop, the computer, the mobile phone, whatever it may be. And once that happens, then the perpetrators have access to potentially all of your passwords. They have access to the data on your system, and typically you're not going to know about it. It's going to be running silent. 15 years ago, when I got into this industry, it was mostly viruses, and they would do all kinds of obnoxious things, and they would do pop-up screens and things like that. And it was an annoyance, but it really wasn't on the same magnitude as these attacks are now. And typically, you're not going to know about it until it's too late. And then lastly, we're going to check in with ransomware, which really is probably the key vulnerability that we see in the wild at this point. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. If not, it's where some sort of trigger occurs typically through email. And once that happens, suddenly the network starts to degrade and people can't open files, and it's discovered in short order that those files have been basically locked, and it really is impossible to unlock those files. They use military-grade encryption, and at that point they send you a note saying, hey, if you'd like your data back, please send us $500. And it's kind of a nightmare from there. So that's been, not to overuse the phrase, but I'd say that's getting close to epidemic proportions at this point. So, many of you may have seen our secret weapon box in our booth today. We had it was under heavy guard and security.
100% secure, sir.
Thank you.
100%.
What we're going to eventually get to is what is the secret weapon for protecting yourself from these vulnerabilities. But before we get to that, what I'd really like to focus on is those 3 areas and what you people can do as individuals to not only protect yourself in your day-to-day work, but also protect yourself at home. There's an array of issues that you may have been part of yourself. I think 2 years ago, I discovered when I was filing my taxes that my Social Security number had been compromised. And the IRS said, I'm sorry, you've already filed your taxes this year. And a little bit of investigation revealed that my identity had been partially compromised through, believe it or not, a volunteer organization that I belong to. And their user database had been essentially hacked, and the Social Security numbers were disseminated, and then these criminals used those Social Security numbers for various purposes, including filing fraudulent tax returns. So at the end of the day, it didn't hurt me too much, but it was an inconvenience, and now I have to use PIN numbers, but I have some tips to avoid that type of thing. Or if you can't avoid it, which often is the case, at least you can mitigate the damage. With regard to the Wi-Fi Pineapple, how many people know what a Wi-Fi Pineapple is? There's got to be one person in the room, aside from Ramsey. So a Wi-Fi Pineapple is actually a hacking device that you will often see in a conference room like we have here, or perhaps at the airport, or perhaps when you're driving around and you connect to Verizon Wireless or you connect to AT&T. You really don't have any way of knowing that access point that you're connecting to actually is what it says it is. So what you want to avoid is ever connecting to an unsecure access point that does not require a password. What the Wi-Fi Pineapple does is it's in somebody's backpack, and it advertises itself as the conference room wireless or the Starbucks wireless or whatever it may be, and you connect to that, you're good to go, and you're logging into your systems, and all the while the hacker is watching every keystroke you make, and they're potentially loading software onto your laptop because now you're part of their network, and they're passing you along to the internet and everything seems fine. So the best practice for Wi-Fi connectivity is a couple of things. Number one, at a minimum, connect to something that requires a username and password that you know from the location that you're connected to or that you're visiting. The other best practice is to actually use like a Wi-Fi hotspot that you control. So in this case, I do not ever connect to a public wireless with my laptop. I will occasionally with my phone because there's not as much information on this. Most of the vulnerabilities are through the laptop itself. So if you have the ability to do a Wi-Fi hotspot from your phone, it's much better. You're controlling access. You log into it. It's fairly simple to use. The other one is to actually use a Verizon broadband card. Many laptops come with them these days, or whatever carrier of your choice. That way you're minimizing the risk that you're actually getting hijacked. And then lastly, through your IT department or your IT consultant, always use some sort of a encrypted connection like an SSL VPN or something of that nature. Once they're set up, they're very easy to use. You click a button, you put in your username and password, and all that traffic that's going to that wireless radio at that point is encrypted. So even if someone is able to intercept that signal, which they can because it's over the air, they're not going to be able to effectively understand what that is and do any damage. So SpearPhishing, getting back to SpearPhishing. This is probably the most important element of this entire operation here. This is an email that was sent out from United Parcel Service, which actually I worked for about 7 years, many moons ago. And does anybody see anything that looks suspicious about this particular email? Maybe we could grab the lights or something. So if we go to the next one, there's a couple of things highlighted. So wrong use of casing. If you hover over some of the URLs, which is when you click, that's where it ends up going. It looks correct, but one of the things that you'll notice also is way up at the top where it says, my UPS notice your account access. It's written in Cyrillic, like the Cyrillic English, which would be a little bit odd, especially since many of the hackers are actually based in Russia and Eastern Europe. So so the key is in these types of situations is to slow down, be cautious. Best practice, in my opinion, is to not click links in any email. If you get an email from a bank, if you get an email from someone that you think that you know, that you do business with, that in itself may very well be a phishing attack or a spear-phishing attack. It's better to just go to the website. If you go to, I bank at Thurston First Bank. If I get a notice from the bank, I don't really go through the email. I just go to Thurston First Bank and log in with my regular account, and then the notice is going to be there as well. So this happened about 4 years ago, I think. So you may hear, how many people here are LinkedIn, have a LinkedIn account that they use from time to time? So probably half the audience at least. Similar format. What these spear-phishers will do is when there's a big news announcement that a company has been compromised and everyone needs to go reset their accounts in your iTunes or your LinkedIn or whatever it may be, that awareness, that news press announcement itself will trigger some of these types of attacks. So they'll send out these LinkedIn account breach notifications, and again, the key here is to check the URLs, check the links. In this case, it's the click here link is the one that says going to my wellness, whatever that is, and it's probably bad news. And again, it's also a Czechoslovakian domain identifier. So if you don't do business in Czechoslovakia, you can actually prevent information coming from those country domains, which is another a tip here. So the other thing I hear quite frequently is that I'm a small business owner. I don't have any information that anybody really wants. I mean, they're not going to target me. I'm too busy running my business. This is something that I'm aware of, but I'm not a target. And unfortunately, you are a target because the technologies and the capabilities of these organized crime rings to send information out at will is driven essentially by money. Who's familiar with this quote? I am, because I found the slide. So this was the famous bank robber Willie Sutton in the 1930s, and so they asked him, why do you rob banks? He said, well, that's where the money is. Why wouldn't I? Sorry about that. So here's an interesting statistic we discovered. The first attack that I became personally involved with was probably around 2011 or 2012. We got a call from a client that had opened up, or actually they went to a website. They went to a website, and the website actually dropped a payload onto their network and started encrypting their files. Well, fortunately, we had good backups, so we were able to restore the backup, and it was fine. But that was, 5 years ago. In 2015, according to the FBI, there was $25 million in ransom paid throughout that year. This year, the first 3 or 4 months of 2016, it was $209 million. So at that rate, we're talking about $70 million a month. What can you do about it? What can you do to protect yourself from this type of attack? In the IT world, what we look at is a belt and suspenders approach. So there's no one multi-layered belt and suspenders risk mitigation. You don't want to have something bad happen to you, so you have to protect not only the perimeter of your network, you have to protect every endpoint on your network, typically with multiple pieces of anti-malware, antivirus, email scanning, email spam scanning that at times can prevent these things from happening, but nothing is foolproof. There's no one single thing that can prevent an infiltration. So that is my handsome dog, Jasper. It's a great name. The problem is it's a horrible password. So if you use your pet's name or just even a capitalized name or just something like that, essentially that's a useless password. Even if a more secure password should be changed from time to time. But essentially, if you type in something that's easy to remember, and that's one of the problems with passwords, is there's so many of them, and you have to have a number, and you have to have a non-numeric character, and you have to do this, and you have to do that, and how could you remember all this stuff? Even a simple phrase, Jasper is my dog, changes the equation from instantly to 610 trillion years through a brute force type attack. And that means there's some automated system that's just hammering on your password somehow that eventually is going to figure it out. Well, it's going to take them a while. I think we did this last year, and it was double that. So next year, it's going to be 305 trillion years. So that's what we're faced with, is ever-increasing computing power. The other thing about passwords is if you can't remember a password, what I highly recommend is using a password manager. And what that does, it's a piece of software that you create a single password that that's the alphanumeric, whatever, Jasper is my dog, _, and then it automatically, without using keystrokes, will put that password into your banking website, into the different websites that you use. And a couple of benefits to that. And number one is it's more convenient. You don't have to worry about remembering 150 different passwords. The second is you're not actually typing on the keyboard. So if your system is compromised in some way, there's nobody that's actually watching the keystrokes. So it just does a programmatic sort of soft injection of the password into the password fields. It's not something that's detected by the keystroke interface. And I will typically use copy and paste to drop username and password into the fields to avoid typing. So some of the things that we do for our clients, of course, is building a standard firewall protocol. That way we can train our staff on one platform. This is an industry-leading platform. It could be Cisco, could be Sophos, could be SonicWall. Doesn't matter necessarily. But essentially this screen here is a feedback from going to a website that had a malware payload built into it, which is what happened to that client in 2011. They clicked on a website that had been attacked with malvertising, which is another form of malware that's out there. And once you click on the page, if you're not protected, it drops it onto your computer, and away they go. So what else can you do with regard to kind of the things we talked about? I think one key thing to keep in mind is that you're working 8, 10, 12 hours a day, but you're still working on these systems in various places. We have mobility, we have laptops, we have mobile phones, we have desktop computers. These are some of the things I've done, not only on a personal level, but just on a business management level. And what I recommend to my clients is, number one, freeze your credit file. You have the ability to unfreeze it, freeze it back, unfreeze it, freeze it back. If you're not actively looking for some sort of loan or something, that will prevent someone, if there's an identity theft situation, from actually compromising that. That wouldn't have helped me with the Social Security situation, though. If you go to that website there, the opt-out pre-screen, you can freeze junk mail, and that will protect you from these these credit card offers you get all the time in the mail. Someone could take that credit card offer and use the information. They know the address, they know your name. They may be able to create a credit card in your name. Obviously, monitor credit card and bank statements. That's a best practice for business and also for personal. Set up alerts so that you know if there's transactions going on in your account. Review your credit reports annually. How many of you check your children's credit reports? How many of you claim your children on your IRS tax return for child tax credit? Nobody? Okay, I see a hand over there. So we do, but that means my children have Social Security numbers. When would you think of checking a Social Security number for a 7-year-old? Probably not for another 10 years or so. So we actually, we obviously don't share their Social Security numbers, and they don't have a lot of activity, but it's a good idea to actually check their credit report as well and make sure. You would expect to find nothing, right? Go paperless whenever possible. Use a secure mailbox, locking mailbox. Use a cross-cut shredder for documents. Don't throw them away or burn them. I use them for my wood burning stove. Use the password manager. And then also, lastly, look into identity theft insurance. There's a lot. You'd have to do a little bit of research on which ones are going to be, the best in terms of consumer viability or what they're offering. But the key is if your identity is compromised, I think it's somewhere in the order of 80 hours of work to untangle that mess. So if you have identity theft, at least you've got somebody on your side if it's from a reputable source. I use Xander Insurance, but I'm not necessarily promoting them. But it seems like they do a good job. So you have the tools, the firewalls. You've got the SSL VPNs on your laptops. You have business policies in your organization that should guide you on best practices. And that would be something like an acceptable use policy at work. Everyone who's working in an organization should understand what they can and cannot do using electronic equipment, technologies. The content filtering is a way to protect the business from inadvertent malicious websites and potentially websites that people may go to when they really shouldn't be. It's a combination. So really the policies have to go with the tools, and the tools are not really enough on themselves. So what we've discovered and what we've been developing is a secret weapon to help deal with these tools and policies and those things not being enough. I don't know if this is going to spring out on me or not.
Stand back, everybody.
So, the truth is, we are the hackers and phishers. And what we'd like to do is make sure that you guys are white hat hackers and phishers as well. What we're dealing with is the black hat hackers and phishers, the ones that want to take your money, the ones that don't care about your business. And what we're doing in 2017 is we're developing a number of innovative IT programs that will help protect our clients' businesses, and also planning to do a series of outreach programs over the year, similar to this, to educate the community on what best practices are and what they can do to protect their business. So it's kind of like, those old cartoon shows when you were a kid. I don't know on Saturday morning, that was a big thing for me. I think Cartoon Network runs 24/7 now. So what we're trying to do is set up, and what we are doing is we're with our clients is we're sending out hacking and phishing emails ourselves. The difference is there's not a malicious payload. It's kind of like one of those little pop guns that goes bang. And what that does is it sends them to a training class so they know that they accidentally made a mistake. The difference is that it's educational instead of damaging to the business network. So we think that this is the next phase of IT security in the sense that the tools are not enough. It's really the weakness in the system is the social engineering. It's tricking people into doing things. So the countermeasure to that, the risk mitigation to that reality is training all of you to learn what to look for and to protect your business and protect you as well. I will be available after the session for additional questions. If you would like the slide deck, I think we have some resource slides. Hopefully we activated those. I can get your information and be happy to send you the slide deck with all of these resources. And that is our presentation for today. Thank you very much.